So there I was, diesel fumes still hanging in the air from my 200-foot drive, when this woman in a neon green tracksuit clacked her designer heels up my driveway and slapped a $500 fine on my windshield like she was serving a court summons. Welcome to Willowbrook Estates, where apparently my U-Haul was a threat to the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood, and I hadn't even finished moving in yet, let alone turned off the engine. I'm Marcus, property manager by trade, professional trouble magnet by accident, and the woman, that's Deardra Pickering, the self-appointed HOA queen, wielding a stack of pre-printed violations thicker than a Denver phone book. 14 infractions before my coffee was even cold. Wrong mailbox height. Grass too long. Doormat the wrong color. Hell, if she could have, she'd have written me up for breathing too loud. She looked me up and down, reeking of cheap perfume and entitlement, and with this smug little half-smile, she told me I had 48 hours to pay $2,000 in fines or risk foreclosure. That's right, I was getting steamrolled before I'd unpacked a toothbrush. But what Deardra didn't know, what actually made me smile, right there in front of her, was that she'd just picked a fight with the guy who collects her rent. You know what I mean? Let me back up a sec. 3 months earlier, Phoenix, Arizona. I'd been managing properties for 20 years when corporate decided my whole department was redundant. Cardboard box. Security escort. End of an era. Same week, my ex-wife tells me she's keeping the house and moving in with Moonbeam, her yoga instructor who sells crystals at farmers markets. So when Great Aunt Millicent's lawyer called and told me she'd left me her place in Colorado, it felt like the universe was tossing me a life raft. Aunt Millicent was the type who could rebuild a carburetor and organize a church bake sale in the same afternoon. And after losing Uncle Frank in Vietnam, she'd raised 3 kids, worked double shifts, and still found time to feed every stray cat in a 5-block radius that I knew HOAs were basically mini-governments with none of the oversight and all of the corruption potential. So I read the fine print when I moved in. Never trust a homeowners association without reading every page. Willowbrook Estates had gotten all fancy since '79. Fees ballooned to $180 a month for, allegedly, landscaping and pool maintenance. Sounded ominous then. Looks hilarious now that I should have known there was trouble when the lawyer mentioned ongoing disputes with the HOA. But I figured, what? Maybe Aunt Millicent planted peonies instead of petunias or put up a gnome. Innocent stuff, right? Not so much. So there I am, baking in August heat, when Deardra pops out of her pristine BMW like the Terminator of suburban rule enforcement, camera clicking, snapping photos of every imagined infraction. I swear, her camera fired faster than a Geiger counter in Chernobyl. Next thing I know, she's waving professional-grade violation notices with my name already calligraphed in, announcing I violated the sacred aesthetic purity of Willowbrook because my work truck still had faded Phoenix Property Solutions logos. Never mind that it's my personal truck. Apparently that made me an environmental hazard. Unapproved landscaping modifications, she said, pointing at Millicent's roses that had been growing there since Carter was president. Mailbox paint degradation. Her words, not mine. Those chips were invisible to anyone but her. But what really caught my eye? The neighbors, hiding behind curtains, peeking out like they were witnessing a mob hit. An old woman across the street shut her blinds when Deardra glanced over. A guy washing his car suddenly needed to check his tire pressure. These people weren't just curious. They looked terrified. Deardra drops the hammer, mentions that Aunt Millicent had compliance challenges before her unfortunate passing. The way she said unfortunate made my blood run cold. I asked to see the HOA covenants and financials. Suddenly, everything was confidential, needing board authorization. When I mentioned my background in property management, her smile faded. She promised appropriate enforcement measures and left me with $2,100 in fines and the feeling I'd just been marked for execution. But here's the twist. What she didn't know is I don't just manage properties, I own them, including, as it turned out, the very unit she called home. The next morning, a certified letter's jammed in my door, Deardra escalating her psychological warfare. Fines up to $2,870 overnight, with time-stamped photos from every angle and threats of liens and foreclosure. But her mistake? assuming I was just another scared homeowner. 20 years in property management teaches you to read the fine print. So I headed to the county records office, the bureaucratic armpit of America, where I discovered the original HOA covenants were 12 pages of common sense neighbor rules. Don't paint your house like a circus tent. Don't store cars in the yard. Somewhere over the years, that had mutated into a 47-page authoritarian playbook, none of which had been legally ratified by homeowners. Even better, Aunt Millicent's rose bushes, grandfathered in as protected plantings. Her violation notices? Legally worthless, but the real jackpot was the HOA's financial records. Expenses that made parade floats look underinflated, landscaping contracts paid 3 times market rates, pool maintenance that cost more than running a spa, but the pool looked like a science experiment gone wrong. That's when Gladys entered my life. 78-year-old retired librarian and secret neighborhood resistance leader, slipping me a dossier thicker than my first lease agreement. 12 families forced out in 2 years. Every one, the same playbook: excessive fines, impossible deadlines, forced sales below market value, with Deardra's real estate company magically snapping up the properties. Mrs. Olivia lost her home for a leaning mailbox. The Rodriguez kids got cited for toys left in their own yard. A Korean War vet fined for his American flag. Systemic, targeted, predatory. The next day, Deardra showed up with Chad, her boyfriend, brandishing a fake security badge. They demanded entry for interior covenant violations. I invoked my Fourth Amendment rights, and Chad started snapping photos through the windows. I casually mentioned the HOA's landscaping contract discrepancy. 40 grand billed, only 15 paid, and the color drained from Deardra's face. They retreated to the BMW, but not before promising serious consequences. Then the harassment campaign started. Anonymous city code complaints, licensing board investigations, middle-of-the-night drive-bys. My mailbox got spray painted, dog poop on the porch, the kind of stuff that would be funny if it weren't so clearly designed to provoke me. Good thing I'd already installed cameras. The footage, BMW at 2:17 a.m., Chad skulking in the bushes, was gold. Diving deeper, I found every contractor billing at least 3 times market rate. Landscaping, pool cleaning, legal fees, 15 grand a year for routine compliance. Real estate contracts and business ownership traced back to Deardra's nephew, Chad, and her college roommate. Classic self-dealing. But the real tell? Only the vulnerable got cited: seniors, single parents, new arrivals. The rest, the McMansions, skated. Our coffee meetings at Rosie's Diner turned into resistance gatherings, neighbors swapping stories, sharing evidence. Bob, a Vietnam vet, provided an engineering assessment. Thousands spent on repairs that never happened, drainage that existed only on paper, and 1 broken security camera. The more we dug, the more the whole scam unraveled. Deardra hired a PI to dig up dirt on me, then tried the race card, painting me as some outside agitator. Fake social media accounts popped up, but I had the receipts. Every meeting, every financial transfer, every intimidation attempt, all documented. Her last-ditch move was a $47,000 special assessment for imaginary improvements, with a 10-day deadline. That was the nail in her coffin. I now had standing to demand a forensic audit. Aunt Millicent, God bless her, had left me a treasure trove. Years of evidence, audio recordings, forged amendments, bank statements. Her last letter broke my heart. She knew she was being targeted and asked me to finish the fight. The stress had literally killed her, and Deardra had probably celebrated. With help from Gladys, Sophia, the paralegal single mom, and Bob, we built a case that attracted state and federal attention. Mail fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, you name it. The community rallied. We held strategy meetings, circulated petitions, even got the local press and AG involved. The evidence package was 847 pages deep. Our annual meeting drew a record crowd. Deardra tried to seize control, but Gladys shot her down with parliamentary procedure, and I presented the evidence: financial charts, audio recordings, before and after photos. When Deardra tried to play the victim, blaming outside agitators, and even throwing in some thinly veiled racism, The room exploded. Neighbors who'd been afraid for years stood up for each other. The final blow? A wire recording of her bribery attempt. 50 grand in a duffel bag. Her voice admitting to skimming and calling residents sheep. The FBI moved in. The board was removed unanimously. Deirdre was arrested. The recovered funds paid for real improvements. Fees dropped. The pool got cleaned. Aunt Millicent's roses became the heart of a community memorial point 6 months later. Deirdre was in federal prison. Chad lost his business, and new state laws required public HOA audits. My new consulting business helped HOAs statewide root out fraud. 23 clients in the first year alone. Property values climbed. Kids played in the street. Neighbors started trusting each other again. Aunt Millicent would have loved it. Her last gift wasn't just the house, but the spark to restore the whole community. So, tell me, what's your wildest HOA horror story? Do you think justice was served, or did the system just get lucky this time? Drop your comment below, hit that like, and subscribe for more true stories where ordinary people stand up to extraordinary corruption. And tune in next week, because Karen tried to steal my parking spot. Little did she know, I own the entire block.